Hello, welcome to episode 2 Adoption, the Making of Me podcast. Um, Today, we're going to discuss the making of Louise. Um, and just a heads
Wonderful.
up, we are having, slight technical difficulties with Zoom, so bear with us. Louise is in her closet in California, and I'm in my closet in Kansas City, Missouri. So we're making the best of it.
Doing the best we can.
Uh, First, though, before we get into Louisa's story, we're going to discuss chapter 2 of The Primal Wound, which, as a reminder, this book was written in the early 90s, but there's still a lot of relevant stuff in there. And I'm going to let Louise take the lead on this one this week.
Okay. It's a good launching point, this book, because it gets us into some great discussions about things that come up with adoption. You're like, oh, that's true. So this is a big one because it's chapter 2, the connection with the birth mother, which I always wondered about this. I don't know if you did, Sarah, but now there's science behind it. But right now it's like, oh, we probably did have this major connection that we didn't even know, now that we know more about children and babies and all of this. So the thing that got me right off the bat, there's a big opening, which I won't read to you, from a man named Donald Winnicott.
Yes.
But
I had that highlighted.
Did you? It's so interesting. So the first thing that really got me was Donald Winnicott has done much to contribute to the understanding of the profound connection between mother and child. He has even stated that at the beginning of life, there's no such thing as a baby. There is instead a mother-baby, an emotional, psychological, spiritual unit whose knowing comes from intuition. I actually really like that, the spiritual part of that. I was like, it is an intuition thing.
I highlighted that too. It's funny. That was what popped out at me.
The same thing. Did it just hit you right away? I was like,
yes.
And maybe because we've had children now, like when Jack was born, I remember just being like, that's my son, Jack. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to be in our podcast. Said no one ever. When he was born, I remember really having this moment, like it's frozen in time to me, where they handed him to me and I looked at him and I knew him and he knew me. And I was thinking, every mother has gone through this, all these amazing, beautiful things. And all at the same time, I thought, oh, someone did this with me. That's when it really hit me. And so I thought
that's so profound. Yeah.
It's a really crazy. So when I read this, I'm like, it is a spiritual, intuitive, like he was crying. They put him in my arms. He's not crying anymore. He knows where he's supposed to be. It's that weird, but they've done studies. I mean, we're having freezing problems.
Yes.
kids that aren't loved or in orphanages and everything else die young. I mean, lots of things. We know about this now.
Yes.
So that was a big standout to me. What else do you think about it?
Let's see what else well, this really struck me on the page 19 about attachment and bonding. And like putting the difference in that, the difference between attaching and bonding, because here again, there are two terms which are often used interchangeably. And so this author said she believes that it would be safe to say that most adopted children form attachments to their adopted mothers. This is kind of an emotional dependence, which may seem crucial to their surviving. Bonding, on the other hand, may not be so easily achieved. It implies a profound connection, which is experienced at all levels of human awareness. In the earliest stages of an infant's life, this bond instills the child with a sense of well-being and wholeness necessary to healthy emotional development. The significance of this very important beginning of life is now being stressed by many experts in the fields of psychology. The question as to whether or not an adoptee is at a disadvantage as a result of missing the earliest imprinting or bonding experience has been raised by many professionals.
Look at that. I circled the exact same thing. Because I'm like, that is exactly what hit me as well. I'm like, bonding and attachment. I mean, this is what we know now about fascinating, because, and of course we bonded with our adopted parents. I mean, my parents are my parents. Nobody, but where's that other attachment? Is that what we're always missing? That's the primal wound.
That's
I
the
mean, I
primal
really think
wound.
that's actually it. And the other thing, what do you think about that? What really hit you about that statement?
Well, it's really, it's deeper. I don't know, because just because, as we discussed last week, the course of my life shifted greatly when I was 7 and my parents got divorced and my mom left. So, um, all the intervening years caused some confusion that I still wonder and about. Um, I can for certain say there, I attached and bonded, I think, but the deepest bond for me was when Becker was born, and to this day, this is a weird thing to say. I'd be terribly sad, losing anyone in my family, but Becker would be kind of a blow that I don't know that I could handle, if that makes sense.
I couldn't handle that. No, it does make
So
sense.
so it makes, to me, I'm reading that about the bonding and the attachment, and I can relate to that, I guess.
Yeah, I know. It's heavy when you're reading it. You're like, I have to reread it and look at it. And I'm like, wow, this is just rich. I mean, she really went into some deep stuff. I thought the other part that was fascinating to me, which I didn't experience, but I know adopted people that have, and I don't know if you did, but the part, I want my mommy. I thought that was interesting. There was actually a study. Okay, it is believed by some psychologists that children up to the age of 2 or 3 years can sometimes remember their birth and subsequent events, but after 2 or 3, those memories fade. There's actually an adopted mom who went in to comfort her child who's crying, I want my mommy. And they said, I'm right here. No, my other mommy. And she was blown away by that. And that's an interesting, I wonder, like, what we forget. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't remember having those feelings because I
No.
was super close to my mom. I'm lucky I had those first years with her.
Yes.
My adopted mom, my mom.
Me too. Yeah.
But after she left, I had this profound loss, and I
Oh,
want
I'm
my
sure.
mom. And were they intermingled? Maybe they were.
Maybe they were. I mean, well, for you, it was twice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I don't remember that either. I remember being very bonded to my own mom and not having that. Like, my mom was my mom, but I have talked to other adopted children who remember weird things. And I'm like, oh, I didn't have that. But that maybe goes to how wonderful our mothers are. Who knows? Or just what our memories, like, I have a terrible memory anyway.
I did.
Be.
You froze again.
Am I freezing?
Yeah. There's
we
one
keep
thing.
freezing, but bear with us, people.
Yeah. Here's what the author said. It's her belief that the severing of that connection between the adopted child and the birth mother causes a primal or narcissistic wound, which affects the adoptee's sense of self and often manifests in a sense of loss, basic mistrust, anxiety and depression, emotional and or behavioral problems, and difficulties in relationships with significant others. That's me, 100%. But again, like, had my circumstances been different and I'd been raised by both of the parents, would I have that? I don't know. One doesn't know. This is why we talk about this sliding doors in our experience. And it'll be fun and interesting to talk to other people when we have them on the show to see. Are you there?
Yes. It will be fun to speak to other people in case you missed that part. We have some experts coming on, and it is all of this is fascinating. I mean, to me, it's just I think more and more about it now that we're doing this podcast.
I know.
It's been so interesting, and hearing people's stories, the things I read and the New York Times are saying just hit me a lot different now. It's so interesting.
The only final thing that I had highlighted, I don't know if you have anything else, because then we can jump ahead to your story, because what did we decide, about 10 minutes?
Yeah.
15 minutes per episode for this. Many people believe that carefully explaining to the adoptee the reasons for relinquishment will alleviate the pain of that experience.
Mm,
And, okay, that she goes into it's understandable why birth mothers have to give up in certain times, but she maintains that the child will feel rejected and abandoned nevertheless. And then at the end, the baby doesn't care why she did it. The baby just feels abandoned, and that abandoned baby lives inside each and every adoptee all of their life.
yeah, I believe that.
So,
That's why we all have control issues, mistrust issues,
mhm.
relationship issues on different levels, whether they're huge or small. I mean, everybody has that, but I do. You and I both happen to know a lot of people who have been adopted, and there's like this thing we're all like, oh, yes. You know what I
It's
mean?
that era too. Like there were so many, I think between the post World War II up until, late
Yeah,
60s, tons and tons of adoptions because of stringent, can't have
moral
sex,
codes.
can't use
Yeah,
birth control, can't have an abortion. So
yeah,
hence, you know, um,
yeah. That's so interesting.
yeah,
I know that there's a lot of us out there.
a
So
lot of us out there. I have quite a few friends as you do. So
we can't wait to hear from you also at
I know. Again, as we mentioned, at the beginning, please recommend anybody you'd like to have on the podcast at the making of me podcast at gmail.com.
and look for
So
us on Instagram under the same
now,
name.
with no further ado, it's Louise's turn. So,
Uh-oh.
Louise, tell me, you know, launch into your story. Were you told early on that you were adopted?
As far as long as I can remember, here's my story. As long as I can remember, I was adopted. I knew I was adopted. My brother is 5 years older than me, and he was not adopted. The reason I was adopted is my mother had Rh negative blood and tried to have a second baby. And back then, after she had my brother, they got pregnant with another little girl, and the blood doesn't connect with. I don't really know all about that, but the blood doesn't connect with the baby and with the mother. So she had to deliver a full term stillborn baby, which no one helped her with psychologically. That's a whole nother story. But so she went through that loss, my mother, and then they decided, okay, we'd like to put in for adoption. So back then, I literally think you like went to the adoption agency and you wanted a girl. They knew that they wanted a girl because they already had a boy, and if you get to choose, but I think they would have taken any healthy baby. So they put in to wait for me. So I always knew, like, when I was growing up, that I was wanted. It was such a big, I always kind of felt for my brother, because from the very earliest memory of being adopted, I didn't know what it was, but I would tell people adoption means love. That's what it was. So I would tell people adoption means love. My poor brother is probably like, what? What am I?
You were
But
chosen. You're so
yes,
special.
I was chosen and special, and I felt that way. I just didn't know why I was being told that. I didn't understand. Um, I think it was kind of a new thing. Like nowadays, you and I know so many people adopted. We have friends who have adopted babies. It's all very open. People adopt different types of kids from different families and older kids. Back then, where I was growing up in Littleton, Colorado, it was very like, you have all these families, everybody's kind of the same. And I didn't know really anybody else who was adopted, and neither did my friends. Or
Oops.
at an early age, preschool, in my preschool, little kids, I still remember who they were, saying, your mom's not your real mom. Now, how they knew this is fascinating. I guess everyone knew I was adopted, so from their parents or what they talk about at home, but I got a lot of that. So I was armed with adoption means love, but that doesn't really arm you.
Yeah.
And no one really ever talked to me about it. I knew my brother made a really big deal about being my brother and took me to show and tell. And in preschool and kindergarten, he brought me to show and tell. He was really into telling people, this is my baby sister. Like it was really special. And we still have that between us. And I love that my parents made that so special. Kind of like he chose me too. He still remembers. He remembers at 5, the judge coming to speak to him. Do you want a child in your house? Do you want another baby? And he said, yes, with my trucks and all these little things. And so I always felt loved and I always felt wanted. And my parents, I'm so loyal, fiercely loyal to my parents. I never actually let my mind go onto the other side of things. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. So, some interesting things like growing up, though, you know that you're adopted. I mean, my family, they're all East Coasters and Midwesterners, and like they're a hoot. I love all my cousins and my uncles and my aunts, and they're all so similar, right? And I was always like, not similar. They may not think that when they look at me. They may just, you're my cousin, whatever. But I saw how I'm not. So you wonder, like, who am I? Where am I from? And so my mom was given some details. I guess I should backtrack. So my biological mother gave me up when she was 18. Her name is Linda. And she was very brave because abortion was actually legal where she was living in Boulder in Colorado. So she could have had an abortion, which I think is huge. The fact that she like dropped out of school, carried me to give me up for adoption. She always knew she was going to give me up for adoption. She didn't decide last minute. She was the youngest of 4 girls, and their father had, I don't really know exactly what happened in the family, but their father had not been around or wasn't a great father. And she wanted, um, as far as I remember the story, she wanted me to have parents, 2 loving parents in the home. And she was kind of the wild child, of course, the youngest one. She got together with my biological father, who I think was her high school love, high school sweetheart, and they hooked up later at a party or something when she was freshman year of college type of thing in school and working as a dental assistant, and got pregnant. And he was actually engaged to somebody else and about to get married and all these things. So she did all this on her own, but he was involved with the signing off of my adoption in 3 places. So you have to sign with the city in Denver. It was closed adoptions, and he was present for all of those signings or whatever he has to do for that. I have letters from her actually to my aunt, and my biological family has given me all these letters where she was very fierce on. They were all trying. She had older sisters, and all said they would raise me, keep the baby. They would raise me. They're a very tight knit family, and she was like, nope. Which I'm like, how strong was this girl? Because when I was 18, I wasn't. I would have not been this strong.
Did
So I
they
really look at her as
tell you
kind of an
why
angel.
she was so adamant about
She knew she was.
not letting them raise her? Or
I have a letter where she was pretty much like, I don't want to be the aunt visiting my child.
yeah, yeah.
How weird is that? Or like, oh, that's your mom, but we're raising, she didn't want all that. She wanted me to have this like healthy existence. The letters I have are very young and very cute with hearts and stars. And, like she's 18.
Yeah.
And my initials, my name that she gave me at birth was Tiffany Lynn Carico. TLC for Tender Loving Care Bear.
I forgot to tell my birth name last week. I'll get to
You're
that
gonna
later.
have to get to, but it was like even the fact that I'm like, it was a cute TLC thing. I mean, this is
Yeah.
how old she
Tiff.
is. Right? And the last letter I have from her, she didn't, right? She she didn't want me to be born on Friday the 13th. She was terrified about that. One's in her last letter. I was born on Friday the 13th, which I consider a great number and day. That's my lucky number. But she was like, please don't let this baby come on Friday the 13th. But I did. The thing I just recently found out, and I'll get into that, is that my biological mom, Linda, I was always told, because I think my parents were told this by the adoption agency, not because my parents are callous, but because there's that third party who tells what they want to tell in this whole handoff, right? They told my parents, like, they adopted me on day 6 of my life, which I always thought was like day 1, because I went home with them. That's what I thought, right? they were told there was this baby. They just assumed I was in the hospital hanging out with nurses or whatever. Well, she actually with me for 6 days. And I
She was with
recently
you for
just
6 days?
found that out. Yes. And I have pictures of us together and everything.
Wow.
Yes. And that is like, excuse my voice. I think that's to me where I look at her as like, wow, she was brave. Not like, oh, she, I used to, maybe as a kid, I would have been like, she gave me up. But now I think, how brave is that? I was a mother to be able to like still hand this baby over is an amazing. And I think it profoundly affected her in her life and her decisions after that. For sure. Hold on, I have to drink water. Sorry. Excuse me. I'm a
Would think
focus.
so. I don't know that I could ever have done that.
Me neither. But I think her circumstances were such that she didn't have the money or the maturity. She would tell people, she's like, I'm not ready for this. And she wasn't. And I'm glad she knew that because I ended up going, I probably have like the best parents that ever walked the earth, which I sort of feel like, how did I get so lucky with my parents? Because it's such a gamble, right? If I didn't have my father, I'd be like my dad and my mom. It's like she did the right thing for me because it's like my parents have recently passed in the last few years, both of the, and so, they're she gave me the greatest gift of all. I feel like they all must know each other and so it's very it's interesting about the 6 day thing because that made me go, wow, that
You
for
had a
me, for bonding, for
Yeah, you
attachment.
had a attachment and bond. I mean, 6 days, like, I was,
Yeah.
taken away immediately. There was no.
Yeah, which is I think the norm. And I think with her, I don't know why it might have been like 5 days, but I was on day 6 adopted. But I mean, I have pictures with her like 2 days old. I'm sitting there, she's holding me. And
That's
it's like
intense.
it's intense. And I don't know if she was rethinking things. I don't know if there's a way. I have no idea what the laws were, what the cause of that was, or if they couldn't find I do know there was a mix up with my adoption, which is funny. One of my closest friends growing up is also adopted. And the reason our parents knew each other randomly but didn't know they were both adopting through my parent. My dad was a lawyer and her father was a lawyer. And they called my mom in September and said, "Oh, we have a baby girl. Come down." Whatever. They go down there, and my mom looked at the baby. This is a true story, and looked at this little girl who I know I should have her on the show, and was like, "That's not my daughter." Like in a weird way, didn't have like a thing.
How
And then
did
all of a
she
sudden,
know?
our friends, I won't she just came in and was like looking at her, but not saying anything, standing there with the social worker and stuff. And all of a sudden, this other family comes in because it was really their turn and their daughter. And they're like, oh my gosh, we've called you too soon. You're not next on the list. These people are who they knew. And it was the craziest thing because that girl, I won't out her and her family and all that. They are so meant to be together. Like that is their kid. And I am not their kid. You know what I mean? That's so interesting. But my parents became very close to them right away because they both adopted baby girls and we grew up together because they didn't know they were doing that. So we all kind of did family things for years. And how crazy is that?
Interesting.
So I think part of it was there was some mix up. So I was like kind of in a holding pattern. No one ever knows. It's a closed adoption in Colorado. To this day, Colorado still has closed adoptions from our years of 1968. And my biological family found me when I was 32 and I didn't find them and I didn't look for them, which is interesting. Even though I'd had my own son, I was starting to be curious about that because of having a child, which I'm sure you were too.
Yeah.
All of
Well,
a
me
sudden you're
too.
like, oh
We were the same age when we found, like, that's when I found Tilda, and
yeah, same age. So it's like I was curious. I just didn't have it on my plate to handle or do and I was really loyal, as I said, to my family in the way that I felt really like bad about doing that. But I got the call from my biological family from an attorney for them, and they found me illegally. It took them like many years. I want to say 8 years or something of trying to find me the good old fashioned legal way. And my biological grandmother was dying of Parkinson's disease and had had a split with my mom, kind of a falling out with my biological mom, Linda. And I think that was because of my birth. And her being a wild child. So they wanted to look for me and find me. So they did. And it was weird being the one being found by someone, because you're like, oh, am I ready for this? Not really. I was not ready for it when it happened, but it happens anyway.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting off track, but
so they found you illegally. Can
they
you?
paid off somebody at the court. So I guess
Ooh.
they finally, I guess an investigator and maybe my aunt, I should really reinvestigate the story, but they were somewhere, and there was the file was there with my name in it. And they were like, so you have her name in there? And they basically, told her the sad story of my biological grandmother was going to die. And they wanted her to meet me and have healing, because I was the only daughter of their sister who had passed. And my biological mom, Linda, died very young at 27 in a horrible river accident, fell and drowned.
God.
So a lot of tragedy around that. And so they wanted to know me, and I guess, whoever it was, that's how they got it. But boy, that irked my father. My dad's a lawyer.
I want to hear about that. But so the attorney called you.
It was actually like a family. I'll never forget the call. So I wrote a story about it, which I'll put up now that we're, doing all this. I'll put my story out.
Yes.
Which Sarah has read. She's one of the only people that's read that story. Yes, they called me. So I'm coming home from work and I'm trying to go back to work. I worked full time, but I worked from home part-time, in the office part-time. I have this baby. I hated leaving him. I hated it. Those 3 days I went into the office, it was like just dying to get home, right? He's 2 or whatever. Maybe almost 3. And I walk in, and the nanny I had part-time's holding him. There's stuff cooking. She's talking to me. I'm trying to take him back. He's crying, the whole scene that you around dinner time and working moms. The phone rings. This is old fashioned. I'm doing this because we actually had a phone. The landline rings. I didn't have a cell phone, I don't think, then. And I'm answering, and this woman says, "Are you Marie Louise Gonzalez?" And I'm like, "Yes." "Who's this?" And she's like, "Formerly Marie Louise Browne," like the way she, and I'm like, and I knew it was a weird thing. I knew, because she was so like weird about my names. I'm like, "Who is this?" And I'm in the middle of like Lita, with this woman who took care of Jack's, talking to me. Jack's crying. Literally, something's burning on the stove. I'm like, "Who is this?" She's like, "Honey, you've been found." I was like, "Oh."
Oh, shoot. You froze.
What did I froze?
You froze. So she said, "Honey, you've been found." And
just
then,
in that voice too. Like, she was so excited about this whole thing.
And she was like a family friend to them?
I think she was like their advocate. She had an official role.
Okay. Okay.
But she wasn't very good at her role, in my opinion, because that's the last thing you want to do to anybody. And she's like, "You've been found." And I said, "Well, I didn't know I was lost. I'm going to have to call you back." And I'm like, everything's coming in at me like, okay, I've been found, thinking it was a parent who found me, which is even scarier in a weird way, right? And first of all, what if I didn't know I was adopted? This always struck me as a really poor way to go about doing this, because thank God I'm pretty secure and I knew I was adopted, and I wasn't like, you'd be like, "What the heck are you talking about?" I mean, it was really, really intrusive in a strange way, but I don't know how she was supposed to do it, but there's
yeah. It's a
way.
Slippery slope.
So, I regrouped. It's a slippery slope. And I was going through a lot of personal things at the time in my own life, just with a lot of stuff going on. And I regrouped, had a big glass of wine that night, put Jack to bed. My ex-husband at the time owned an ad agency and had to work late and wasn't home. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make this call. So I remember laying on the bed and calling her. And this part's interesting. When I called her, I did tell her that was kind of a shock, that opening. And I don't feel lost. Like, I love my family. And so I said, "So who's finding me?" It's kind of, you were like this. You told me that when you were going to meet your family, you're very guarded. I was a certain way, like I turned into my mother. My mother's name is Mary Lee. My mom, who raised me, who I consider my mom, is my mom. I think the person who does all that shit for you in life is your mother. Now that I've been a mother. my mom, Mary Lee, turned into Mary Lee, who's very business when she doesn't like something. You know what I mean? I was very like, and who's this? And da, 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 da. Like I was channeling my mother to keep that exterior thing and be very German and Midwestern at that moment. And that's my mom, right? You know, because you live in the Midwest. And so she was very like sing-songy and happy and had gotten close to my biological family through this whole thing. So she's like, oh, there's these aunts and they want to find you for your grandmother. And she's giving me the whole story. I won't out my biological family story, but they're wonderful, nice people. And, you know, I basically was like, well, what about, are you calling for my birth mother? I'm confused. And she's like, well, honey, I have some bad news. You know, she passed away in 1976, I think was the year when I was in second grade. That's why I remember it. That was 76. And I just sat there for a minute and it was like, then she kept talking. And that's a go too, right? Because if you ever think you're going to meet someone, it's going to be your biological mother. I didn't really care about anybody else, even my biological father, because I was told some things when I was adopted that they were very young. They weren't together. I was told he was Hungarian, that my biological mom wanted to be a teacher, that she was somewhat Italian. Like I knew some things that turned out to be true, but you know, I never focused on him. So the person you're thinking you're going to meet is going to be your biological mother one day. And so that's kind of, and she keeps talking and telling me all these other details. And I'm just thinking, wow, she's not alive. Right. And
Did you feel any sort of like sadness about that?
Yes, I felt relief in a weird way. That's mean to say. Relief because I was scared of that, you know. And then terrible sadness because I found out she died very young at 27, and how she died. The woman told me that it was a bad accident. She was playing around on the rocks with her friends and fell into the river and went down in the snow runoff and drowned. And that like, and you know, it's interesting. I've always been terrified of falling in and drowning. So it's funny how you have these. And I remember thinking, wow, but I had this other profound thing. And you and I have talked about this, but I have these like spiritual things where I feel like I get visits from people. And I really believe that. I kind of knew she was dead because there was somebody through my adolescent and high school years when I was rebellious and was going through a lot and not always doing the right thing for sure. I would have someone who would talk to me. I would come home and like someone, it wasn't like your inner voice. It wasn't my inner voice. It was almost like someone going, honey, this is not going to go well if you continue on this path. And that end, and I always had it, even up until my 30s. And when I found out she had passed, I never heard that voice again.
That's so
interesting. I don't know how to
explain
it. Does it sound
no, that you did a good job of
hokey,
explaining it. No, that doesn't sound hokey to me. Look who you're talking to.
Thank you. You and I can spend like hours talking about this.
So
yeah, no.
What I want to go to the illegal thing and your dad and how that played out.
Thank you. Yes, keep me on track because I'll go on about this stuff. So especially the spiritual thing. Okay, and then I saw my mother-in-law. Okay. So the hardest part about this was it took me a while to, she had all this, the emails. It wasn't email. Was it email back then?
Yeah.
But that would have been, would I be open to receiving letters from this family? So I said, I'm open to receiving letters. I'm not really interested in knowing them. I was like, I don't need to know these people. I have a family and I love my extended family. Something I wanted to bring up that you and I had talked about, and I know you think this too, but my extended family, my cousins, my aunts, everybody that's not my direct family, my brother, everybody, I don't know if all adopted kids are like this, but I feel almost like more into my family than I think they are into me. Does that make sense? Like even when I was little, I was so excited to see my cousins. And even now I'm always sending them texts or, you know, I'm trying all the time and they're probably like, oh, she's so annoying. You know what I mean? Like I'm always trying to be like, I love my aunts and uncles. Like, so I'm very loyal to the whole gang. And so these people want to get to know me. And I'm like, I don't know these people. Like, they're not my biological mother. Who cares?
Right.
Right. you're curious as hell. So I said they could write me, but I probably wouldn't write. And it took me a good 6 months to ever write them back. So, I mean, I got the letters, absorbed all the information. It took me a while to write back. The weirdest part about that is the day I got the letters, I had them all out on the dining room table. And a lot of them were the letters one of my aunts had saved from my biological mom in the hospital, just letters over the years that she had written. My ex-husband walks in the door and he goes, "When did you write all these letters?" Because we have the exact same handwriting.
Wow.
And I was like, no, those are from my biological mom, Linda. He's like, "That's your writing." I mean, I came in thinking you wrote all this stuff. Like, what is this? That was weird.
That's weird.
That's just those weird nature versus nurture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, just we have the same sense of humor in her writing. She writes just like me. The stuff that probably bugs you about my writing, it's just the same.
Nothing bugs me about your writing.
You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like long-winded sometimes. Sarah's our very good writer. So we, my dad, so then came the thing of eventually I met people in my family, my biological family. It went really slowly. I met a cousin first who lived in California. He's a boy and he was
27. Was this before you told your dad?
Yes.
Okay.
He was 27 at the time, and poor guy, he happened to live by me. So he's the guinea pig for the whole family. I mean, we actually got very close because of that whole experience, but so I won't get into all of that. That's a whole nother story. But when I told my parents, they came out, maybe I was about 34 by then, and I wanted to tell them in person. They came out for a visit, and I hadn't really been close to this family yet. We weren't keeping up. Like, I mean, they wanted to be close, to their credit, and I was like still not even into really knowing them. And a couple of them didn't want to know me either, by the way. A couple of my relatives on that
Oh, frozen. Darn
live.
it.
I'm
Okay.
so glad. Oh, so, I'm so glad some of my biological family wrote me and said, "I'm so glad you're alive and healthy, but I don't want to be part of this." They weren't thrilled about that.
Interesting. Were those like aunts or cousins or
one aunt and a few cousins? And
did they eventually come around or
no?
Huh.
And that's okay. And
Yeah.
they were like the ones not as close to my mother, I think, and the four sisters, or it's all okay because everybody has their feelings about what happens or what goes on, and their comfort level with this whole thing. It is a thing. And so when my parents came out to California, we went to this place that's wonderful called the Inn of the Seventh Ray in Topanga.
Yes.
Little plug for Topanga Canyon there.
I miss Topanga.
Yes, you do. And it's a great restaurant. And it was one of my parents' favorites. So I thought, okay, I'm just, my ex-husband kept saying, "You have to tell them that these people have found you."
Oops, you froze.
I mean, thinking about it gives me the dread. Thinking about this conversation still gives me the dread. And this is many years ago, 20 years ago. I feel like it was yesterday. So we go to the restaurant. I'll never forget this. We're sitting there having wine. And I said, "Listen, I have something to tell you." I don't know if they thought I'm getting divorced or I'm pregnant. Their faces, are like, "Wait, what's happening?" And I said, my biological family found me on my mother's side. And she's not alive. It's the cousins and my aunts. And I wanted to tell you this. And I've been in communication with one cousin and a little bit with writing. Before it goes further, I want you to know about this. And I don't know how I feel about it. And I'm blabbing kind of because and I'm looking at them. My mom immediately wells up, starts crying, but she's listening. To her credit, she's just listening. My dad, I'll never forget this. Like, I almost can't talk about it. He very close voice, and he looks at me. He stands up from the table. He's like completely bursts into tears in a restaurant. My father's not a burst into tears man. Leaves and goes
Oh
to
my God.
the bathroom, the gift shop, whatever. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm thinking, this is what I was terrified of my whole life was this. Because I did feel grateful and maybe unduly, ridiculously loyal and grateful. I'm like that as a person anyway, with bosses, with friends. Like, it was like everything you're scared of happened right then. And my mom sat there crying and she,
Oops, froze.
"Your dad's okay. Oh, am I there? She said,
Yeah.
your dad's okay. He'll be okay. We knew that you're adopted. I mean, this could happen. It's just, it's really late in your life to even think about it now. Like we hadn't ever really, it's, the years of torture of worrying about this were, when you were 7 and 5, would somebody come and want to take you back? And, you know, she said, so he's just blown away, I'm sure. Just give him a minute. And she's crying and I'm holding her hands. I'm like, Mom, I'm not going to go off and be with this new family. Like, I'm telling her I love you. And she was really brave. My mom could be really brave. She was a strong woman because I'm sure inside she was just like freaking out, but she could see I was so affected by my father and my dad. And she's worried about my dad, of course. And I don't know what, her strength just came and she was loving. And then my dad came back to the table, was visibly shaken and said, I'm not mad at you. I forgot you were adopted.
Oh, you froze.
Like,
Darn
what's
it, at a
happening?
pivotal moment. So he said, we lost you for a second. He said, I'm not mad at you. I forgot you were adopted.
Yeah. He said, I forgot you were adopted. You're my daughter. Those were his words. You're my daughter. I don't know how they got this information, but they weren't supposed to. This was a closed. I mean, he went right to the legal thing. That's my dad. And he's a black and white, not a black and white guy. He's actually not a black and white guy, but very, you do the right thing. You say you're going to do this, you do this. This is my father. Atticus Finch. That's, my nickname for him. So he just was very like, you're my daughter. What do they want? What, it's not okay. And he was just really hurt. He couldn't talk about it more that night. He didn't want to know anything about them, or he was curious that my biological mom had died. He felt very sad about that. He always said that he had a huge his greatest gift, this baby that she gave to him, that he always said, she gave me my little girl. And it makes me cry because he was just so, and my mom was very hurt too. It's just that she was trying to be the healer in the middle of all this. So she didn't even get to have her emotions in some ways. And I think it just blew him away. I think he thought I was going to say I was having another baby or something. It's not the news he expected. And then
did he ever come around to say, it's okay, I understand, you should meet them if you want?
Yes, he did say, he did even that weekend say, if you need to go forward with this, you can go forward with this. I don't want to be part of it. And I don't agree with it. And I'm very angry about how they found you. And that was that, sort of. Not like he did say, if you want to tell me about it, it's fine. But you could see he was so uncomfortable with it. And I said, Dad, I'm not sure where I want to go with it yet, because I feel like you as well. I actually feel very kind of people in my life that I didn't expect to be in my life all of a sudden. And I'm dealing with a lot of other stuff and a kid and working. And so I don't know where I'm going to go with it, but I will be honest along the way and tell you and tell Mom. And he's like, you don't really need to tell me. That was interesting. He didn't want to know.
Do you think it affected in any way you not wanting to pursue anything more? I mean, in terms of like,
yeah, a little bit. It did, the best thing that happened to me then is I was going to a marriage counselor, and I went to her for a visit about this, and I'll never forget what she said. It stuck with me because it sounds a little cold, but it actually really helped me. I was telling her all about this and what I'm going through with my parents, and they're hurt, and like my mom was trying to be open. She wanted to hear about it, but she really didn't, but she was trying, and I could just see it on her face. She's trying to do the right thing and not lose me. They were terrified I was going to for all the holidays now, like with this, like their whole thing was like, my dad was like, they don't get to have the grandson on the holidays. Like, that's his grandson, like the whole thing. And I said, Dad, I'm nowhere near anything like that. And I would never do that ever anyway, because this is my family. Like I was very loyal to my family. I still am. And I think the thing that was interesting is the therapist told me, listen, when you adopt a baby, they're adopted. Your parents, this is the 1960s, had no emotional help or resources or family counseling to go through what may come from that. They probably lived in fear that you're going to be taken away from them half your childhood. My dad said he did fear that, and I never knew that. I guess that's a normal fear. You don't think about, maybe your mom felt that way. We don't even think that they may think someone's coming back to get them. Change of plans, right? So she said they probably had to deal with all that without help from counselors,
Oh, you froze. Yeah.
all these things throughout their lives. And did I fries? And so she said, they've had to deal with all this. They put it aside. You're a grown woman. They've done their amazing parenting job. They get to enjoy their grandson. They're in a certain time of their life. This thing comes at them, and it's really their issue to deal with, and you get to deal with yours.
Yes.
And
I'm glad she said that.
yeah. And she said, you have to separate that out. You're allowed to find out who you are, and you're allowed to go as far as you want with your comfort level with it. And they know that you're a person from other people, and they'll grow too if you're open and honest about it. And if they need to see a therapist, they should see a therapist. And I thought that was interesting. It made me go, it kind of makes me feel like, oh, don't say that about my parents. But at the same time, I was like, that's true. And I'm going to take back a little. And so I did get to know my biological family. It took time. And I know that I'm a little bit distant with them. I'm like that with everybody anyway. If I'm not, you know me, we're both like that. Like, when I met them, I was all about like, I am not going to like these people.
But, and for me, like I said last time, I do, that is my regret that
yes,
because if Tilda were still alive now, I would be more open-hearted. And even though there were times I got close, like would let myself open, like vulnerable or
because
whatever.
We're older now and we can handle that emotional capacity. Like,
oops.
We're more
Sorry for our technical difficulties today.
I know both of us keep freezing.
I do have one more question, then we can
wrap it
up. And, obviously we'll continue to revisit our stories because things will come up that we'll relate to and all that stuff. You have expressed that you don't have an interest in meeting your biological father. Is that true?
It is true. I don't really want to meet him.
Or siblings.
I'm kind of interested.
Have siblings out there.
Yeah, I think I have siblings. I'm pretty sure. I don't know that for a fact. I know that through.
Well, didn't he get married and have kids?
We think so. I know that from my other aunt on the other side, on my biological mother's side. I do know where he lives, and I know who the family is because there's social media, and I've been on Ancestry. I have. Okay, so my husband now, my current husband,
Oh, frozen. Your current husband.
Ancestry is my Christmas gift.
Got you. Okay.
Gave me Ancestry as my Christmas gift, and he sent we didn't think about that. We just wanted to find out if I'm German, Italian. Told us Hungarian, all this stuff. I don't know why I didn't think about that. Who am I? It's like, I'm so spacey about this stuff sometimes. So we send it in, and then I get online, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, why aren't I linked to like my family? My cousins I grew up with. I'm like, yeah, right. Well, they'd have to add me in as like, an adopted child, which I hope they do. Because I don't know if any of them are on there. I think a few are. But right away I was linked to my biological mom's side that I knew. There was like some, and I'm like, oh, I know them, Then I was linked to like all these other people. First, they're all cousins mostly. And the reason I know that is
what I do know about Ancestry, if it says probable first cousin, that means it's probably a sibling. Because that's what happened with my sister Annie. We came up as probable first cousins.
Right.
Which means
because
sibling.
It's especially when it's a half thing, right? So it's like so all these people were linked to me, like a bunch, I do know some things now because of that. I found out, first of all, I thought fascinating because some of them are active on there. So I'm like, so I wrote one of them and said, oh, how weird. I'm not going to say because no one knows I exist in that family. So
maybe they do. You don't.
I don't think so. I have a feeling no, for the reasons I know about some things with my adoption, but I wrote, oh, how weird. We're linked as first cousins, thinking, because I see she's active in there. Nothing. Yeah. I mean, they're probably like, who the hell is this? Right? Like, who is this? either that or ancestry's made a mistake. Who knows what they think? But because of that, I've gone on Facebook and all the social media things. I know some of them and who they girl, we
Oops.
grew up close to each other and we look so much alike. And I do know she's a cousin because I found out who her father is. So the thing I know is that my biological father is the second of 7 boys, if you can believe that. I mean, so that's a big family. But I don't really, um, he was like this 19-year-old kid. Like I have a son, that's like he helped give me life, bless him, because he signed off on everything. But I feel not as it's like not the journey of like the biological mom of like Linda, what she had to really do.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never felt, and maybe because my father is such a strong father for me, I just don't have that interest, but I have an interest. I wouldn't like to meet him, but I'd like to know more. Does that make sense? But you don't really get
Yes.
to know more without the other part. Like, can you just send me all this? And
When did you do the ancestry? How long has it been?
not that long, 2 years, the year before the pandemic, Christmas.
Maybe eventually someone will.
Yeah, I think the story is ongoing because my son is on the case and he's just interested because
Yeah,
we
of
found out
course.
things that were funny and we're like, oh, we got because he thinks it's fascinating. But even my son is loyal to my family. Like he was so close to my parents, his grandparents who are now both deceased, my parents, and he was so close to both of them. He's close to my brother. He's close to it, like he loves my family, and he's kind of an isolationist. He's not, he's a introvert. So he's like, I don't want to meet all these people. Like he's like, we're kind of similar in that way. It's kind of funny because I just know it's a lot, and I don't know if I'm emotionally ready for that.
Yeah, I mean, life is long. You
Like
never
that.
know.
So
You
when
could change your mind.
I got married 3 years ago, and I do want to say this: my mom did get to meet my biological family. They came to my wedding.
I
You were
remember
there.
this.
You know
Yes.
them too. They're lovely people, and they all really liked each other. And I did want to tell you that my dad did want to meet them, and we were going to have a lunch, and we had it all planned for the summer. And then the summer before, he had a massive stroke. And so he actually said, I will meet them, because it had been enough years. He saw that I'm not running off on he saw that I kept telling him they're like wonderful friends who give me a part of me back. And
Yeah.
and my brother got that way too. My brother really enjoyed all my cousins, and um, because my brother's very like my brother, he
Yeah.
chose me. He always tells me I chose you.
Yeah. You
So
took you to show and tell.
he sure did. And he was proud of. So it's like, my dad he did. And I love that about him. Like we went to Mexico and I was going through a divorce, and he said, I'll meet your family. I'll meet him. And I said, okay. And I was setting up a lunch. Then he had a massive stroke, and maybe he wasn't meant to meet him
Maybe
for the
not,
pain
but
for
but
him.
just the fact that he came around like that is
Yeah.
so touching and
So touching.
heartwarming
Like,
and
I think my mom had a greater emotional ability to meet them. She's just strong. I think my dad, it would have been really hard for him. And I think maybe wasn't meant to be,
yeah,
you
that's a
know?
good way to look at it.
Yeah.
In a good way. Well, we could just talk forever.
I'm sorry. I'm like, how long is this?
I think I don't know how long. We'll find out soon.
With a lot of editing after all our glitches, it might be shorter.
Darn it, our glitches, but I kept going. I would hear where you trailed off and was able to ask.
You're
Thank you
very
for
good at this.
sharing. It was so. I
Thank you.
love your story, and
Thank you.
and love what a great upbringing you had, and amazing parents. I know you get to see your brother tonight.
I do.
Did
My brother's visiting me.
Did I break up? So that then our next episode, we're going to be interviewing somebody. Well, I won't say because shifts in the schedule can always happen.
Yes.
So, but next episode, we'll be discussing chapter 3.
And we have a really interesting guest. I mean,
yes,
she's a real expert in the area of many areas of adoption. And
it'll be exciting to talk to her.
We have a couple great guests lined up. So we're past our stories, but it's going to get really interesting now, like another level.
Yes. Not just about us.
We're all about us. So. We're moving on from us. Now you know about us.
Or partially about us. We'll
Partially.
continue to evolve, and more things
That's
will come out as we go along.
right.
Which is so great. And again, Louise, what's our Instagram? Our
We
Instagram.
find us at Instagram at the Making of Me podcast.
And if you want to email us, ask us anything, express your opinions, or suggest any
Yes.
guests, you can find our email at the making of me podcast at gmail.com.
Yes.
This
and
has been
please reach out. We'd love to hear. This has been awesome. I've enjoyed these last 2 episodes greatly.
Me too. I look forward to it.
Me
Okay,
too.
friend. I guess
Bye.
we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.
Please subscribe.
you.
Hit that subscribe
Yes.
button.
Please subscribe and share.
Yes, and share. Tell everybody you know.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.